and welcome to Qtr Time podcast in partnership with Carbon Jacked. I'm Lucy G.
And I'm Lucy P, and we're here to bring you all the netball goodness you never knew you needed.
We're delighted to say that this series of Qtr Time podcasts is supported by Carbon Jacked, an environmental startup that helps you combat climate change.
They're an awesome company that provide monthly memberships which plant trees, support epic climate projects, and help you to reduce your carbon footprint.
Memberships start from just £2.50 per month, so you can help save the planet for less than a cup of coffee.
Signing up is super easy. Go to carbonjack.com and enter NetballPod for a huge 30% off. The link is in our show notes. Go check it out.
Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of Qtr Time. Round 4 is done and dusted, tick that off the list, and it definitely did not disappoint with some shock results and so many incredible comebacks. There is honestly so much to digest in today's episode. Louise, what have we got coming up?
Okay, so as you probably can expect, we've got our 3-word summaries of all 6 games coming up first. Next, we'll go on to our game of the round and our player of the round, and then a very special umpiring episode featuring none other than Gary Burgess and Louise Travis. We leave no stone unturned, covering everything from pay for umpires, controlling the game in terms of physicality, and what they would like to see change about the game from an umpiring perspective. While we were preparing for this episode, we just had way too many questions and things that we wanted to ask. So we're actually making this into a 2-parter episode, and we'll be chatting all things umpiring again later on in the season with some more special guests.
Happy days. I'm so excited about this one. It's certainly high time we had an umpiring episode. So really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. So firstly, our 3-word summaries. Luce, take it away.
Right, well, first up for the round was Bath versus Storm, and surprise, surprise, Storm took the win, 62-58, and the 3-word summary I've gone for is upset the apple cart. This game was a big surprise given the finishing positions from both teams last year. Storm took a dominant 17-9 third quarter and weathered the comeback, excuse the pun, from Bath in the final quarter. Praskovia Peace was absolutely fan-bloody-tastic. Balls were flying into her from everywhere, and Bath really lacked the defensive pressure to stop them in that second half. Big shout out to Abby Robson getting player of the match against her old side. Although she didn't have the flashy stats to her name in this game, she really changed the game for Storm and made life hell for the feeders. Storm put together an impressive 60 minutes that will have other teams doing a double take. Very interesting to see what this means in the race for top 4, which just started heating up.
Yeah, for sure. Next up on Saturday, it was Dragons versus Rhinos, with Rhinos taking the win 57-52. And I said, watch your back. Rhinos bounced back from a 20-goal loss to Bath to take the victory over Dragons, with Rhea Dixon back in the starting 7 for this game. There were a lot of errors from Dragons in the first half, which meant that Rhinos were able to take a strong lead. Burgess debuted for Rhinos and was partnered with Rushton in the second half, demonstrating the depth of the Rhinos shooting bench. However, Dragons won the second half 33-25 and executed a magnificent comeback to finish within 5. I mean, Dragons are looking like a completely different outfit from last season, and no doubt they will take scalps this year, no doubt.
Yeah, 100% guaranteed. Next up on Sunday was Stars versus Mavericks, and it was a 10-goal win to Mavericks, 62-52. And I've gone for, this might be a little bit harsh, I've gone for could have been worse. Mavericks dominated in the first half of this game, and I was really expecting a pretty significant scoreline from them, given that they were 14 up by half time. However, Stars capitalised on Mavs fading in that second half, and quarter 4 particularly, which Stars won 17-10. There were a number of errors from both sides, Mavs with 10, Stars with 11, and Stars really struggled to find a shooting combination that worked for them, and they made a lot of changes. Good news, though, which Melissa Bessel was understandably delighted about, will be that Qtr Time will return to the side for the next match. From a man's perspective, they do remain undefeated, but they've only won 1 out of 4 final quarters so far in this season. So they'll definitely need to tighten up as they come towards the end of the games.
Oh, really interesting. Next up on Monday, it was Sirens versus Thunder, with Thunder taking the win 71-60. Crikey. And I said, a valiant effort. It might not have been a super tight game, but it was a really great battle. Given that Sirens were down by 3 players due to COVID precautions, one of which is the key cog in the defensive machine of Vincumbo, the Scottish side really showed up and put out a very impressive performance. Don't forget as well that Emma Barry is also out for the time being. So with all that adversity, they perform remarkably well and are just getting better week on week. It's incredulous to think that Thunder have gone 4 games scoring 70 plus each time, but they've done it. I mean, they've done it. Unless they're paying the scorekeepers, like they've done it. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely wild. Following this game was an absolute cracker, Pulse versus Wasps. I really, really wish we could have seen this one. Pulse took the win 52-35.
Wowza.
The 3-word summary we've gone for, this is actually given to us by Joanna on Facebook. Thank you very much. And she has said, second half masters. It's such a shame that this one wasn't streamed, because I think it is the definition of a game of 2 halves. It was neck and neck in quarter 1 and quarter 2, with nothing to separate the 2 sides, despite a slightly slower start from Pulse, who went 4-0 down at the start of the game. But Pulse had like a mic drop style third quarter going 18-5. And they left Wasps just eating their dust by the end of the game. 5 is actually the lowest quarter score that we've seen this season so far. And when you think that's in 15 minutes of netball, that's 1 goal every 3 minutes.
Yikes.
Yeah, hard yikes. Pulse kept the 2-time champions just 13 goals in the entire second half, which is just absolutely outrageous. The lovely Lauren Pritchard got in touch with us on Instagram as she was there in person, and she highlighted a captain's performance from Everett, who really led by example, and the game-changing decision to bring Honey into centre. We've heard that her feed and her vision into Liv Cheen was exceptional.
And our final game of the round was Storm versus Lightning, with Lightning taking the win 72-56. And for this one, I said, quieting the storm. After a shock win against Bath, Lightning certainly took the jam out of Storm's donut with a strong 16-goal victory. Storm did manage to close the scoreline to just 6 goals at one point, but they had left themselves too much to do after a stunning 39-goal first half from the reigning champs. But despite a sterling effort from Middleton, who racked up 4 intercepts, 3 deflections and 6 turnovers, Lightning were just dominant in this game. They also managed to empty their bench and allow some of their youngsters to get game time under their belt nice and early in the season.
It was a really, really, really interesting round. And I think that race to top 4 has just become even more unpredictable now, like with the likes of Storm and Pulse really challenging, Rhinos being a little bit all over the place at the moment, not showing that consistency just yet, but wow, like what a treat of a season.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to our game of the round. So unsurprisingly, we've gone for Storm versus Bath. And this was just a wild game. I loved watching this one. First up, looking at some stats. Defensively, Bath absolutely dominated. 11 intercepts to Storm's 1. 14 turnovers to Storm's 3, 12 deflections to Storm's 9. However, they were also very heavily penalised with a whopping 60 compared to Storm's 38. Layla Gusgoth was responsible for a third of these on her own with 21 penalties, which is really just uncharacteristic of her. You don't often see that.
Yeah.
The unforced errors as well were really interesting. Bath had 12 to Storm's 3. And to be honest, I think this is where the game was won. Storm were just able to capitalise on Bath's errors and crucially take them to goal, which I think they really struggled to do last season.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. And I think from a Bath perspective, Kirsty Harris had a really strong first half for Bath. And we've not really seen too much of her before. She's kind of like giving me Kim Green vibes. But Abby Robson did an absolute number on her when she was brought on towards the back end of quarter 2. And like we said in the summary, she didn't have a lot of stats to her name, but she absolutely shut down that Bath attack in the second half.
Yeah, and for Storm as well, Proscovia Peace, player of the round from last round. She was sensational and she was just absolutely instrumental in this win. She scored 53 from 62 of Storm's goals. That's not her attempts, that's of Storm's goals, with McGee putting up the remaining 9. And McGee did step up more in this game compared to the previous hit out against Thunder, but I kind of do still think she needs to assert her authority a bit more as a goaler and make herself more of an option. Otherwise, it will be a long season for Peace. And if the other teams can figure it out, Storm might be in trouble.
Well, this is the thing. I think it can get quite predictable, this style of play, knowing that your end goal is always going to be to give it to Peace 99% of the time. And therefore, you know where to focus your defence. And what really impresses me about the likes of Thunder is that they've shown that you can have your absolute rock in goal shooter with Mvula, who scored 50 goals against Sirens in this round. But Cardwell, as a goal attack, also steps up and she takes her fair share of the shooting. She got 21 goals against Sirens as well. So I do think that Storm will need to find that balance a bit more.
Yeah, I do think as well in this game that I was impressed by Austin and Parsons in the second half. Austin in particular was able to feed Peace so quickly without holding onto the ball, and that didn't allow Bath the time to set up. I think that's something we talked about last week, is about can the players feed her out in front of her. They did in the second half of this game. And I thought that Storm were lacking defensive pressure in the first half of this game. But once the changes were made to have Middleton in GK, Curtis in GD and Robson in Wing D, that is absolutely where Storm came alive for me. And that should be their starting defensive lineup for sure, from my perspective.
See, I disagree. I actually want to see Kwanga in that starting lineup because she was on the bench for this game, but we didn't get to see her play. But I do feel that you've hit the nail on the head in terms of where that defence came alive. It felt previously in the first half that they were like working in isolation rather than as a team, but this particular setup allowed them to work more cohesively as a unit. But yeah, I would like to see Kwanga in that starting 7 for sure.
Amazing. So moving on to our player of the round, Luce, take it away.
So we have gone for the absolute firecracker of Sasha Corbin. I thought Sasha played a blinder this week, and she was pretty much unstoppable in this game against Stars. She had the joint second highest number of feeds in this round behind Metcalf, who had 26. Corbin, along with Parsons and Dix, had 25 feeds, showing just how prolific she is in attack. And in fact, she actually sits third in the league overall for feeds. She also had a really clean game with just one penalty, which was the lowest of any wing attack in this round, besides Dix and Joseph, who had none, and just one unforced error to her name. But what impressed me most of Sasha this week was her speed and her ball handling ability, which was absolutely nuts. We often praise the likes of Leota for her outrageous ball skills, but Sasha really pulled out all the stops and had some phenomenal passages of play that honestly just left me scratching my head. Like, how on earth did she do that? It was wild.
Yeah, she was incredible. And her partnership with Kadeen is, I mean, it's always been clear to see, and the pair of them work brilliantly together. But there's something about this year, Sasha just seems to be flourishing and appeared to be head and shoulders above her opposition this week. I mean, Iman Thomas and Nicole Humphreys were not able to contain the firepower of Sasha, and she, I think you could argue as well, along with most of the Mavs team, just shone so brightly this week. It was awesome to see.
Yeah, 100%. And apart from that sort of last quarter fade from Mavs as a whole team, I thought they were a spectacle to watch. Coming up after the break, we chat to two of the biggest names in UK netball umpiring. It's the legendary Gary Burgess and Louise Travis. Gary first umpired internationally in 2006 and has over 100 international umpiring caps. He's also umpired every Super League final since 2008, which is crazy. Louise first started umpiring the Super League in 2007 and in 2021 was awarded the accolade of Umpire of the Year. Both Gary and Louise were recently named in the group of 13 umpires selected for the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham this year. And today we chat to them about how the game has changed, the increased scrutiny for umpiring decisions, and gamesmanship in netball from an umpiring perspective. Don't go anywhere, you won't want to miss this.
Do you want to help combat climate change? Well, you can by joining Carbon Jacked. We're both members and we love it.
Memberships start from £2.50 and your money goes towards amazing projects, from planting trees in the Peak District to providing refugees with sustainable solar cookers. You can get a huge 30% off by entering Netball Pod when you sign up at carbonjack.com.
Carbon Jacked also do loads of great work with businesses, so get in touch if your company wants to become more sustainable. All the info you need is in the show notes, so make sure you take a look. It is such an honour to be joined by, I have to say, netball umpiring royalty, Gary Burgess and Louise Travis. Welcome to the pod, both of you.
Hi, Lucy. Thank you.
Hello.
I'm excited to say that you're the first umpires that we've had on the podcast, and we thought it was absolutely about time that we did a special episode dedicated to the officials who make the game, who often don't get the recognition that they deserve for their hard work. As we know, you umpires often work as a team, so we've brought you on as a pair so you can feel more at home and to hear your two unique perspectives on umpiring at the elite level. Really excited to be chatting with you. So firstly, I wanted to get some overall insight from you into how the game has changed, particularly domestically in recent years. We hear a lot about how the game of netball has become more physical. Jess Thirlby put it as non-contact but fully contested. And in the VNSL, we've seen an upward trajectory in terms of athleticism, player skill level, the speed of the game, and then SSN is another step above that. So Louise, as an umpire, what has been the impact of this increased physicality over the past few years?
Yeah, Lucy, I think you've summed it up really well there, actually, because I thought the question was going to be how has it changed? And I think you've summarised really well how it has actually changed. And I think particularly in the UK domestic league, the skill level, the variation in play with international players coming into our league as well, has really progressed the game. Gary and I reflected, the season, this is our 15th Superleague season for both of us. And, to look back at how the game has changed in those 15 years, it is quite incredible. It's almost unrecognisable now when you think back to when we first started umpiring the Superleague. I think for me as an umpire, what does it result in is, I think, both from a physical perspective, us as umpires now, sometimes it goes a bit unappreciated how much physical training we have to do to ensure that physically we are up with the game, and that we are giving our best service to the athletes that we're umpiring. Our training regimes are, and I don't say that lightly, it is a regime, and we dedicate an awful lot of time to the physical side of our training to ensure that we can keep up with play. In terms of, the actual umpiring skill side of things, I think particularly I'd say over the last maybe 5 seasons even, the physicality of the game has gone up another notch. And I think, the summary you gave of how Jess described it as it's a non-contact sport but fully contested, and I sometimes use this notion of contact with a small c versus contact with a big C per the rule book. There is contact in our game, and that as an umpire is one of the key skills that is now required from us at an elite level, is to really interpret and understand what is contest, or, contact with a small c, 2 players contesting a ball coming into contact each other, versus what is actual contact that is impacting that player and their ability to play the game. And I think that has probably been the biggest advance in the game, as I say, probably over the last 5-6 seasons, because that physicality is unrecognisable now to what it was several seasons ago.
So do you think we should redefine how netball's thought of? Should we call it semi-contact or semi-non-contact or something else like that as the game's progressed?
I think fully contested is the best way of describing it, because I think that summarises it absolutely perfectly. The game is contested. I came off the back of the game last night, umpiring a Super League game last night, and it was fully contested. There was so much physicality on court, but all really managed really well within the rules of the game, both by the players, obviously by us as umpires, but by the players as well. These players are training day in, day out. And so when they go out on court, they are fully contesting every single ball. So I think that description, fully contested is the best way to describe it. No way is it a non-contact sport, but I don't think anybody really calls it that nowadays. Those that probably either don't know netball or haven't watched netball recently, come, and I've got friends and relatives that come to games now and go, wow, I didn't actually appreciate how full on and how contested the sport is nowadays. Long gone are the, this lovely game of netball where, everybody runs around and doesn't touch each other type thing and doesn't contact each other. It is fully contested. So I think that's the best description for me.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Like you say, from now compared to 15 years ago or so, it's completely unrecognisable. And one of the other things that we've seen change, particularly in recent years, last year being the prime example, is the increased visibility of netball domestically. Obviously, we had all of the game streams last season. We've got 3 streamed this season, which is more than pre-pandemic. But with this comes the added scrutiny from commentators, from media, people like us, from coaches, players, fans on social media, about whether a particular call was or wasn't correct. And this often results in a huge amount of discussion around the game, even more so if a particular call in question has an impact on the final result, if it's a tight goal-for-goal game. Gary, you've said before in an interview with For the Love of Sport, and I quote, "No one can beat an umpire up more than they'll beat themselves up." If and when it happens, how do you respond to the negative comments or criticism of your decision-making during a particular game?
God, I think I'm the worst person to ask about this, because every bit of guidance says never entertain, feedback from trolls or people that have got a negative opinion. But I always take it by the scruff of the neck, if I'm honest. And I think I always say I'm as confident in my incorrect decisions as I am as my correct ones, because at the point that they were made, you were making them with all of the information that you had open to you from the angle that you were standing. Now, as we know, television angles, and you alluded to it before, the visibility of the game is higher than it's ever been before. But the fact remains that the camera angles are often better than the ones that we had, or vice versa. We sometimes have a better angle than the cameras do. So I would challenge anyone that's got an opinion on an umpiring decision to make it without pressing stop, start, rewind. If you do that, you've already seen it more times than what the umpire has. But always kind of put yourself in that situation that, trust the umpire to make the right decision. It's not like we've just come off the side of a school netball court. We've put in thousands of hours to make those decisions. But it does ring true, actually. I was asked at full time yesterday for a clarification on a rule. And basically the response came, it was an error. I'm sorry. And they were like, oh, okay. That was it. It was kind of a bit of an astonishment, but actually we will continue to make errors. Even the best umpires in the game will continue to make errors because we're not perfect. There is never a perfect game. You can strive for excellence, but there will never be a perfect game.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because even last night, I think it was so many games, I lose track, but
Siren Sunday, yeah.
That was it, yeah. So Sirens were attacking, and I think it was Gia Abenefi who had the ball, and Laura Malcolm had essentially run into her and quite clearly from the camera angle had knocked it out, but she was called for a replay ball, and I think she was expecting the contact. And I sort of sat there as a fan like, oh my God, that's clear as day. But obviously the positioning of the umpire was very, very different. So obviously umpires are humans, they're going to make mistakes, and it's great when they do hold their hands up and say, yep, sorry, that one's on me. But do you think that there needs to, with the increased speed and physicality of the game, that we maybe need to have a shift about how the game is umpired, with like a TV umpire or a third umpire or something? Like what's the potential for development there?
I'll come in very quickly on this and say I don't think there is. I don't think there is any development. VAR or any type of equivalent in netball just wouldn't happen. It just wouldn't work because the game is so fast. There's just no time to go back and review. And I think from a football perspective and even in a rugby perspective, if you look at Hawkeye in tennis, where you have a number of referrals, all of those potential examples just wouldn't work in netball because it's so fast. The other thing to kind of, put pay to it is the real skill in netball umpiring is the application of advantage. It's not a guess. It's a value judgment based on experience over time. The better and more experienced an umpire, the better their ability will be to play advantage. And I always liken it to an open door. When you're starting out in umpiring, you often play things through a wide open door. Now, when you get to our level, the door could be the slimmest of cracks in the door, and the umpire's going to squeeze it through there. Sometimes it's going to work. Hopefully, most of the time it's going to work. But there will be occasions when, oh God, it didn't work. Didn't it work because there was a fantastic interception, or didn't it work just because it was too much of a risk? So I think all of those innovations, I think, give the sports credit. The other thing I will say is reviewing a match doesn't need to happen at that time. I mean, we as umpires spend up to 4 hours post-match reviewing all of the decisions. We get those supplied by performance analysts within the match. So we review all of our decisions. We can look at all of the contact decisions in a row on a program you can use, clip together, you can look at anything you want. But I think, for me, I don't think there's any scope for that sort of stuff in netball.
Yeah, really interesting there. And that's really brought into the light for me how much work goes in behind the scenes in terms of the review process. And many people don't know this, but umpires at the top level, as far as I understand, are all volunteers, and you get expenses and things like that, but there's not a proper wage. I personally find this utterly baffling, considering we pay umpires at local, social and county level, but the higher up you go, the less you get paid. It's insane to me. So Louise, how important is it for the growth of the game that we look to make officiating a viable career option?
I think that's a really interesting question, and Gary and I have debated it over many a year. It's really hard. I get asked all the time, why do you do it? If you don't get paid, why do you do it? I do it because I feel privileged to be involved at the highest level of a sport that I played as a schoolgirl. I never played at a particularly high level, but, as a schoolgirl, and is the highest female participation sport in the country. And it doesn't have the profile that it does in some of the other countries that Gary and I have umpired in. But the reason I do it is to be involved in a sport at an elite level, dealing with international athletes, umpiring international athletes. Would it be great if it was remunerated? Of course, that would be a great advancement for us as umpires. But I think it would then come with an awful lot more expectation on us as umpires, and also an awful lot more responsibility for us as umpires. And I am all for it, and I'm with you, Lucy. I think it's an inevitable next step in the professionalisation of our game. But equally, you've got to put it in the context of our game. And, our game is not fully professional, even at a player level. I don't know the details of yet, but it is not fully professional. And that's why I say I think it is, hopefully, within my umpiring career, within Gary's umpiring career, I think it will come. And I think it's natural it should come. And I think it will put a level of professionalism and expectation into officiating, which I think is there because of the quality of the umpires that are involved in the game. But it will almost reinforce that through being remunerated and having those expectations set through things like contracts, etc. But Gary might be better placed to answer it.
Yeah, I'll come to you next, Gary. We saw in an interview with ABC, you said, if the funding and the wages of umpiring goes up, then you can expect it to be open season for holding umpires to a higher level of accountability. And we wondered, did you mean this in a positive or a negative way?
I think it's both really. I mean, just to kind of reinforce Louise's point, I know that England Netball are really going to be massively focusing on the professionalisation of the Super League, and it absolutely is going to include umpires being taken on that journey. But as I said, I stand by what I say. It will become a situation where everyone needs to be more accountable. If you're paid for a role, you're going to be held to account for it. But again, I think also there's going to be more accountability from the teams. There's going to be more expectation on questioning calls. At the moment, the very best umpires as Louise has already said, dedicate huge amounts of time off the court to their trade and to their craft. But that will become an expectation. I mean, we work in Loughborough. I work in Loughborough, and every week I see the football refs come out off the weekend. They've refereed on Saturday and Sunday. They spend Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in Loughborough University reviewing games, looking at sports psych, all of that sort of stuff. Now, that's right at the other far end of the spectrum. But again, that's what I'm talking about, accountability. The only other part in that is, with this forecasted professionalisation, there'll be a massive influx of new spectators, perhaps people who don't understand the game as well as our traditional viewership. But again, there will become that kind of catapult, really, with all of it that comes with it. But it really will be the most positive snowball effect that this game has had since we won the Commonwealth Games in 2018.
Yeah, and actually it's really interesting you highlight the Premier League football referees there. So I found that the men's Premier League football referees are paid a basic yearly retainer of between 38,500 and 42,000 based on experience. And they're then also paid £1,150 per match on top of that. And then if you look over in the other side of the pond, it was reported that NFL referees make an average of $205,000 per year. I mean, netball's certainly, we're a long way off that kind of level, but I really think there should be the equal weighting given. There's no argument to say that those Premier League referees are putting in more time and effort than you guys are. That's just categorically not true. So you should be, deserve to feel the same benefits.
Yeah, I think those are really interesting comparisons. But the other thing that the FA have got, which actually England Netball does have, is they've got investment in the development. So that's one of the things that we were able to do within England Netball, is to invest in the development of umpires and to provide performance analysis and all of this sort of stuff. It absolutely isn't as on a grand scale as you would expect in the FA. But then if you look further afield, outside of the FA and the RFU within this country, there isn't the support that you would expect in England hockey. I know that firsthand. And other areas. I would go as probably to say that the EBA, the English basketball, and probably not even called that, England basketball, that their equivalent of our Super League, their referees are paid. It is something that's endemic of officiating at the highest level in other sports. I mean, tennis again is another big money thing, but the difference there is that it's a lot smaller pool, and that's one of the things that we may need to consider if we do professionalise it at the netball umpiring, is that it's a smaller pool that umpire more to increase the consistency of performance. We currently have 18 umpires at the moment, and that wouldn't be sustainable in that model.
Yeah, I think it is such an interesting discussion. Like, personally, I think that there should be as much outrage as we have to our players not getting paid properly as we do to our umpires. So there's so much to it. But I want to bring us back to some Super League specifics. In the Pulse versus Mavericks game recently, there was a moment where the bench were very vocal and they're exclaiming about an offside call. And Gary, you were umpiring at the time and you had to be quite stern with them in that instance. We've also heard of benches in netball being given a caution before, which I find hilarious. We often see in men's sport that there's a level of abusiveness or disrespect towards officials that is entirely unacceptable, particularly in football, I think. But in netball, by and large, that doesn't really happen. Louise, how do you think that we can ensure that it stays this way and netball remains a disciplined and respectful game from grassroots all the way through to elite level?
Great question. And do you know what? It's something that, again, quite a few of my friends who maybe aren't in netball talk to me a lot about, because they think of me as an official and think about football ref, etc., etc. Going back to that first question when you were saying about how's the game advanced, I think game management is the other side that has really advanced over the last few years. And, there's a whole section in the rule book about game management. And I think the important point of that is that the visible stuff is the caution, when the umpire stops time and issues the caution. But the way in which we as umpires manage the game, and, that's why I say this is outside of game management, but actually manage the game, is a lot of stuff that actually you might not hear on the telly. You might not even see if you're in the crowd. And there's a whole toolkit that we have as umpires to ensure that we're managing the game from first whistle to, actually pre-whistle, really, from the minute of getting into a venue, from doing nail checks, from liaising with the coaching staff, etc., before the game, all the way through to post-match, talking to the coach post or the captain post-match. And, that for me is about that level of respect, mutual respect between us as officials and as the player and the coaching staff that we're managing the game with. And so, going back to those things that maybe aren't so visible, it's a look, it's a longer whistle tone, it's, a slight open palm to a player type thing. And that's why I say it's about managing the game. So actually we don't get to the point of necessarily having to go in with orderings off or suspensions, etc. Or to your point, end up in a situation where there is raised tension, anger, etc., etc. Game management is absolutely critical to ensure that that game flows from first whistle to last whistle without anything untoward taking place effectively. But that is such a skill as an umpire of knowing when do I need to step in with the formal game management, to your point, around cautions, warnings, etc., versus how am I managing the game to ensure the play is flowing, etc. And that, for me, is absolutely critical to ensure that we don't get into a situation where we are abused as officials. Because sometimes when I watch particularly football games, rugby not so much, but particularly football games, you know, and I get my friends saying to me, would you stand for that? Absolutely no way. And I would hope I would never get to a situation where a player was addressing me like that. And certainly I know how I would deal with it if it did happen. I think that level of mutual respect is there in our league, definitely. It's definitely there when you get to an international level, and I think it's there when you're at the domestic level as well. And that's only a good thing for our game, because I think our game is such a spectacle now, and we want to be part of that spectacle. We want to allow the game to flow. We don't want to have to intervene with formal game management, because it takes away from actually the skill set that's being played out in front of you.
Yeah, what's really come up for me there when you've been talking is about this early intervention, keeping the lid on the game before it gets to that point, and also that respect, which I think is just a testament to the hard work that goes in from an umpire perspective. But moving on to talk a little bit more about player styles in relation to umpiring. We had a really interesting comment come in from Lauren on Twitter, who sent us a message on the topic of gamesmanship. So she was highlighting times where teams might take their time getting the ball back for the centre pass, pretend not to know where the penalty is set, forget to stand by the side of their player, all these sorts of things that players do. And we know that there are rules in place to prevent delaying play. But I think it's also fair to say that when the pressure is on and the time's running out, players have been known to try and give their team the edge by just bending the rules a little bit. And in that Mavs Pulse game, which we talked about, that was a classic example. I think there was about 20 or 30 seconds left on the clock, and everyone from Mavs was just taking their sweet time, getting the ball back down court to where the penalty is set. And on the one hand, I think fair. Why would they hurry to help their opponent potentially score and win the game? On the other hand, it can be infuriating as a spectator, and you could argue that it's an example of poor gamesmanship. So Gary, coming to you on this one as World Netball Integrity Ambassador, what are your views on the balance between playing into the law of the game versus playing within the spirit of the game?
Well, I think it's interesting that because there are rules on both of those. I mean, there is a rule that's players acting contrary to good sportsmanship, but then also there are rules about holding time and delaying play. So within that game, the kind of most humorous thing for me was in that game, everyone was complaining about, hold time. No one was going to go to collect the ball. But as umpires, the rules state you can't hold time unless the ball leaves the courts around, which is basically in a normal Super League game. Normally, the electronic LEDs when the ball goes behind there, if it's on the floor in there, then you can't hold time really. But I think from a point of gamesmanship, it's all part of the game. I mean, the game management rules are quite clear. If you infringe the rules, you'll be penalised or you'll have advantage played on you. But this whole idea of not choosing to pass the ball back, it may come as a surprise to people. There is actually no expectation for either team to get the ball back after a centre pass. You just can't stop it from getting back. So, a goal shooter that's just scored and it's the other team's centre pass, having the ball on their palm of their hand and offering it to an opponent, that's not actually delay and play. They're giving it to the opponent, say, here you go, you can get it. I don't have to throw this. Likewise, I can put it down on the floor. If they start rolling it around or kicking it away or all of this sort of stuff, then there are delay and play. This whole idea of gamesmanship and, bending the rules can be bent as long as they're not broken. That's my stance on that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm so on the fence about it because, like you say, it's like, fair one. Like, why would you help speed up the game? But on the other hand, I'm like, just get the ball back. It's really, really irritating for me. So looking at some sort of specific players now, no doubt you've heard fans and commentators time and time again discuss varying skills and different styles of players, some of which make the game really exciting, and I would even go as far to say unpredictable, and thinking particularly about Qtr Time here, looking at you, Kat. And as fans, we absolutely love watching these players. As an umpire, Louise, are there any players who've really made an impression on you over the years because of the way they play the game? For example, like, have any particular players made you have to examine the way that you officiate the game because of the way that they play the game?
A really, really good question. I think immediately who springs to mind is Peace Proskovia, who, when she entered our league with Loughborough Lightning, I'm trying to think which season she arrived, that was a very different style of player for us as umpires to umpire, because she was a very, obviously a very tall and very static shooter. And so whereas I quite often describe the European game as quite, quick, short passes, not a huge amount of aerial ball. And then suddenly you have this incredibly talented goal shooter come into our league where, the whole game is around getting aerial ball into her. And that, as an umpire, completely changes how you move, how you read the game, because rather than the 1, 2, 3 into the circle, it's going one and then possibly straight into the circle. And, defence took a while to get, used to that sort of style of play. And we as umpires took, it was obviously quite unusual. And obviously, that's come through with, a lot more tall shooters, the physicality and the height of our shooting circles is getting more and more now in the league. And so I think, Peace probably stands out because I remember that being different, not necessarily challenging as an umpire, but just being a very different way of umpiring a shooting circle. Aside from that, I'm trying to think, Gary, if you've got anybody that you can think of.
I can't believe you've left her out, because I know how much you respect her, but Laura Langman.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. From an international level, absolutely, yeah.
And I think for the same reason, really, I always put, and, people shouldn't really be surprised by this, but I always put Karen Atkinson and Laura Langman in the same bracket because of the style in which they played. And the reason, your question was, did you ever have to reassess or evaluate your umpiring style? You absolutely needed to with both of those, because they had such a low and fast foot pattern that footwork appeared to be occurring when it actually wasn't. They're a very low foot pattern. So what I'm saying about that is it's like a real patter on the court, but the speed in which the ball was carried through was just unbelievable. And again,
and the race back to the centre pass, because obviously as umpires, we're meant to be pretty much in line with the centre circle when we blow for the centre pass. Well, if you had Karen or Laura playing centre, that was a challenge in itself.
That was it.
Anywhere near it.
That was it, but they weren't throwing it back; they were running it back faster than you were, and you're just thinking, "Oh, good lord!" But just to reinforce again what Louise was saying, the style that Peace brought into the league, there was just this like big, massive step in that she would take, which again would really fox the defenders, and it's such an unorthodox thing back in the day. I mean, Mary Trollope now does it all of the time. But there was such an orthodox step in. So where the landing foot was, Peace would take probably a 6 foot step in, which again would mean the defender has just got to hold fast and stand upright. And they can be incredibly close to her than you would normally expect. But then you've got to, as an umpire, reassess whether or not the shooter is contacting with the ball, or if inevitably, right at the very last minute, the defender just flicks their fingers down and draws the contact against them. But those players come immediately to mind. And then, of course, the wizard that is Qtr Time. She
looking forward to her being back in the league.
She impressed as a silver fern, and I mean, I umpired her many times, as did Louise internationally. But again, she's just a wizard. Same with Diana Leota, really. The stuff that they do, the Corbin sisters, particularly Sasha. I'm sure that girl can fly. And hook things back in. But there's a long list of players that make you think. But that's the best thing you can do as an umpire.
And I think that's a good point, actually. And rather than necessarily singling out players, it's about not going in with a preconceived idea of how the game will be played, because there's such different styles now, even within a team, in terms of how individuals play. And just, the skill as an umpire is to umpire what's in front of you, not to umpire what you think should be in front of you, but to umpire what, how the ball is being played in front of you. And that is responding to the individual players and the styles in which they play, which can be very different even within a team.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating insight from you guys. And before we move on to some rapid fire questions to wrap up, we've just got one more for you. So besides the professionalization piece and paying umpires for their skills and expertise, what does the future of umpiring look to you both? Gary, I'll come to you first.
I think more off-court support, and again, professionalisation does come with a payment, but psychological support. As you say, the more and more it's going to be visible, the more and more people are open to online criticism and things like that. So just equipping umpires with that kind of sports psychology point of view, and again, the players are only going to get more and more physical. I mean, I think there's a number of players in the league now that could pick up any Olympic sport that they choose, really. That's what we're talking about. So again, those real support systems with regards to S&C and rehab with physio and all of that sort of stuff. I think it's that stuff. Because regardless of what anyone may think, the actual umpiring skills of this pool have been the best that they've ever been, and the consistency between number 1 and number 18 is getting closer and closer and closer, and that's the best compliment that anybody could ever have, either as an umpire in the pool or as the head of the Showdown as I am. It's just that consistency of expectation and consistency of performance between the pool. I think that's the highlight for me, I think.
Thanks, Gary. And anything for you to add, Louise?
No, I'd agree with what Gary said. Yeah, absolutely. The support off court is becoming more and more critical. I think the other thing as well was obviously last year with the league being centralised, as umpires, we were blessed with having fantastic footage of our games, which meant that our post-match analysis, as Gary alluded to earlier, we will spend 3 to 4 hours analysing a game on every single game, which when you've got, lovely, crisp, clear sky footage, hopefully capturing the umpire in the footage, that makes our job an awful lot easier. So ensuring that we have the availability of that level of footage on each of our games is absolutely critical, because even more so than when the hour that you're on court, the amount of time that we put into the analysis, that's what progresses us as individuals. And so ensuring that we've got the tools available to us, and Gary and England Netball have done a fantastic job over the last few years in terms of ensuring that what footage is available to us as umpires, just continuing to progress that, because most of our job is done off the court in terms of our personal development.
Oh, that is absolutely brilliant. Thank you both so much. So before we let you go, we've just got a couple of rapid fire questions, if that's okay. So first up, Gary, we didn't have neutral umpires for the quad series due to travel restrictions. Do you think that we should continue to have the very best umpires for the big matches, regardless of which country they're from, or return to a neutral umpiring system?
Very quick response. You always have neutral umpires, regardless of where they come from. However, I do believe that having umpires from different countries on matches is the way forward, because it just cuts out any hint of bias on conscious or actual that may exist.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally agree. Louise, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that the upcoming Commonwealth Games in Birmingham is going to be your first Commonwealth Games, am I right? How are you feeling ahead of such a momentous occasion?
I'm super excited, Lucy. Yeah, I haven't been to the last couple, and I'm a massive sports nut generally. So being involved in the Commonwealth Games for netball, absolutely incredible. As umpires, we strive for World Cups and Commonwealth Games. Are the two biggest tournaments in our sport. But as a general sports nut, being in an environment, a multi-sport environment, is going to be incredible. And having it on home soil, yes, I am super excited.
Amazing. So finally, to round up, a question for both of you. What is your least favourite netball rule?
I'll go first. Foot up to the line.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same, Gaz. Yeah. Just
foot up to the line. It's got to be up to the line, but not too close, not too far away. I understand why it's in the book. I absolutely do, and huge respect to the international rules panel. But yeah, I think that kind of is a bit of a fussy one, really.
Yeah.
I think the other thing for me would be a Super League level. For the last couple of seasons, we've been trialling a substitution rule. So, you know, if a player wants to come off court at the moment, internationally, for example, they have to ask for time. We have to ask why, and they have to basically make up an injury if they're going for a substitution. So we've been trialling, you know, we ask why and they say substitution. So I think if we can try and build that into our game, I think that would be good as well, because I don't think it's great players having to sort of think about, oh yeah, it's my ankle this time, or my, you know, my arm, or whatever it is.
Yeah, it does seem a bit silly, doesn't it? So it's great to hear that you've been trialing that. Thank you both so much. This has been a really, really fascinating discussion. Really appreciate your time. And also thank you to Lauren for sending in your question and good discussion point around gamesmanship. Hope to see you guys again soon. It's been a great chat, and take care.
Thank you.
Very much.
Fascinating conversation. I absolutely loved that. It was just really interesting to hear that insight. I can't believe how much work goes in behind the scenes that no one even ever takes into account. It's really inspiring, actually.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, it's time to take a look ahead to the next week of matches, round five already. I can't believe it. Of the Vitality Netball Superleague. And this year we've teamed up with Sideline TV to pick our Showdown of the week, highlighting 2 key players who we can't wait to see go head to head. So what are we looking at this week, Luce?
Well, before I reveal the goods, I think it's worth mentioning that the Mavericks Thunder game is set to be epic. But sadly, this isn't one of the televised games. So instead, this week, we're looking at Sirens versus Lightning. And in particular, we're looking at Neve McCall versus Fran Williams. We know that McCall can be devastating on the long bomb, but Fran is quite a different goal defence and plays a really different game to a lot of other defenders. So it'll be interesting to see how she tries to nullify McCall. Williams isn't necessarily known for being like a super man-on-man tagging type of defender, and she'll often sit off the body and hunt and really confuse that space, but she can pile the pressure on mentally. And the question will be whether McCall can stand up to that and still keep her shooting percentage high. I do think that Lightning will take this game, particularly if Williams can get on top of McCall. However, Sirens did just put up a whopping 60 goals against Thunder, with McCall netting 20 of these. So who knows? We could be in for another upset.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that Lightning will take it too, but I think Sirens will definitely make life difficult for them for sure.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think by heading to our socials, and don't forget to tag @sideline.tv.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Qtr Time. We honestly cannot wait to bring you even more netball chat and a wrap-up of round 5 next week, along with another super special guest interview.
Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media @Qtr Time Pod for the latest netball updates. Get involved in the conversation online by letting us know what you thought of the matches this weekend and which players have stood out for you.
We'd also really, really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate and review the pod, as it helps other people to find the podcast. If you enjoy listening, please let us know, and do spread the word with your netball pals so even more people can get involved in the conversation. Don't forget to check out our partners Carbon Jacked and take advantage of the exclusive 30% discount of their memberships using the code NetballPod. Take care, everyone, and see you soon. Bye.